Welcome to Redefining Medicine, an intimate and personalized program that illustrates a different side of the practice of medicine. Our in-depth conversations will focus on mentors and motivators who are consistently reshaping, redefining, and rediscovering the field of medical health care. I would like to welcome triple board-certified physician, Dr. Zach Bush. Dr. Bush has committed his career to the development of breakthrough science that offers new insights into human health and longevity with a consistent dedication to educational efforts surrounding today's practice of medicine.
Dr. Zach Bush, it is a privilege to have you sitting in that chair, and thank you so much for your time. I know you're fresh off your presentation, so we'll try to keep it as easy as possible.
Well, thank you for keeping the curveballs down.
You're welcome. So, from what I understand, you were one of the few triple board certified physicians out there. You couldn't make up your mind.
Yeah.
What was
what led to that craziness, right? Yeah, I actually didn't like school when I set out to do medical school. I decided I didn't want to be a doctor even. I was just going to be a nurse, and then slippery slope of curiosity in the end, right? And so started into that medical profession. I was going to be an engineer, and then went to the Philippines, started delivering babies with a group of international midwives, and it blew my mind. I couldn't believe what I was experiencing on a daily basis over there. The experience of transition into human life is such a miraculous thing. And then, of course, my whole education after that, which took me down the course of the typical allopathic MD training, University of Colorado for pre-med 4 years, then med school for 4 years, and then transitioned to the University of Virginia and was there for 9 years, where I did all of my postdoctoral work. So I was doing internal medicine initially. Internal medicine is kind of general adult care, acute hospital care. So I was running ICUs and bone marrow transplant unit and stuff like this, and just seeing really acute, bad chronic illness, acute exacerbations of chronic illness. So that was kind of what I was seeing, and it was this drive to do what every physician takes an oath to say they're going to do, which is do no harm and really bring something to their patients. And all I could see was harm. And so every time I was exercising a bigger and bigger muscle of pharmaceutical prowess, knowledge, more and more potent drugs, I was just seeing decimation of human physiology every day, and felt like by the time I was done with internal medicine, I was left with kind of an empty bag of what am I really going to feel good about practicing. So I then dove into endocrinology and metabolism, which is a fellowship, 3-year fellowship in studying hormones, the way they regulate the human cell growth, everything from embryology to the aging process. And then metabolism, which is really the study of mitochondria, which are interesting little buggers that live inside of our cells. And they really are kind of buggers. They're more like a bacteria or a virus than they are anything human. They have their own DNA. They replicate inside our cells like bacteria would. They're just very tiny bacterioids. So those were a big part of my study, which took me into cancer. So I had this really broad education going, and then suddenly dove into the cancer stuff, and I was studying the interaction between nutrition and food kind of elements, the mitochondria, and the way in which that influences our risk of or ability to fight cancer. So I was actually in the end developing chemotherapy at the University of Virginia. So I had dove all the way down that allopathic rabbit hole, and found that at the end of that, the most powerful tool that I had found was vitamin A, which is, of course, a very powerful nutrient within our food. And it was blowing away other chemotherapies as far as its efficacy to induce some of these fundamental important cell changes to combat cancer. And so delve into development of a vitamin A compound, won some awards and got some NIH funding, and looked like it was going to be my career. And then the universe just pulled the rug out from under me, like it tends to do when we're going the wrong direction. And so the university lost its GCRC funding that had been present since 1969. The collapse of the whole American economy happened in the late 2000s there. Our endocrine department went from 75 down to 23. It was just a bloodbath. And so I suddenly found myself, being without a job after 17 years and $200,000 of school debt, and I've got 2 kids. And well, yeah, at that point I had 2, and then so I went on to another third one, which was hospice and palliative care, because I really felt like, well, maybe if I can't help people live, I can help them die gracefully, and really experienced some real beauty in that. And so as a associate director of a hospice group, in addition to my endocrine primary care practice that I started when I left the university in 2010. So now for the last 8 years, I've been running my own clinics and developed my own basic science labs now, and I have 3 biotech companies, so it's been a crazy ride.
Is there a specific area of research that you're focusing on now?
my passion right now is this huge thing that opened up in 2012. So I started a nutrition center. We were studying the power of food to transform chronic disease. And I'm kind of an extremist when it comes to almost anything in my life, but when it comes to nutrition, kind of, go big, go home. So 2 pounds of kale juicing a day and all this crazy stuff for my cancer patients. And about a third of them seem to read the textbook and get better and do good things and have miracles happen. And a third of them just seem kind of non-responsive. But then there was this stubborn third of my patients that were getting sicker, not better, on health food. Their inflammation would go up every time we exposed them to kale, things like this. And so we were just seeing this totally dichotomous, backwards physiology happening. And it took me a while to trust my patients, right? Because we tend to blame our patients when it's not working like we expect. Well, they must be non-compliant, they must be. Started to trust my patients and started to ask questions about what's wrong with, or what's interacting with their physiology in kale. How is it possible? And so we ended up, going down our own rabbit hole to find out, a lot of biochemistry and cell biology around this thing that has been popularized as leaky gut, leaky brain. And so we started diving into this whole thing, and we ended up finding a whole family of molecules made by bacteria and fungi that induce protein synthesis and genomic changes in the human cells to combat the inflammation-causing agents that are in our food and other places. So huge relationship that we uncovered between the microbiome, this invisible world of bacteria, fungi, viruses, parasites that interact positively with our physiology. And the really cool passion that I have now is that we are barely human. When you take a look at the numbers of cells that you have on your body, just looking at the bacteria alone, you're outnumbered 10 to 1. And there's only 30,000 species of bacteria compared to 5 million species of fungi. There's 20,000 measly human genes. There's over 125 trillion genes in the genome of the fungi. So we are, logarithmically, we're less than 1/10 of 1% genetically human. And we are increasingly proving that every time we step away from that incredible microbiome, we get sick. My driving force right now is obviously my children. Right? I've got kids that are 20 and 18, and looking at these kids.
I'm sorry, back up. You have kids that are 20 and 18.
Yeah, yes I do.
Okay, we'll get to all your anti-aging secrets later.
It's the microbiome. It's what keeps us from aging. And so at 20 and 18, they are one of the very few healthy kids in their generation. 46% of children by age 18 have a chronic disease in the United States. 46%, 1 in 2 have a chronic disease by 18. So the driving reality that keeps me pushing and pushing is that by 2035 we will see 1 in 3 children with autism in the United States of America. It doesn't matter how big we grow, the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, irrelevant. There is no financial system in the world that can handle that level of chronic disease in a population of children, let alone the fact that we will have an 80% rate of cancer in our geriatric population by that point. And so we are at the tipping point. It's an incredible moment to be human. We are very likely, more likely not to be here in 50 years than be here.
But yet, all of the scientists out there that are working to keep us living till we're 150, but that can't happen with all these assumingly toxins you're speaking about.
If you're living to 150 under our current system, you are going to be one of those Holocaust survivors. You are going to be in that few humans left in a productive state, and it's going to be a terrifying economy, supply chain and everything else, unless we change everything. And that's what's going to happen. I really believe we're supposed to be here. I really believe we can do this as long as we get together unified as a human species and say we want to stay, we want to play. And to play, we got to start to respect our relationship to the ecosystem, starting with the microbiome, but then of course the macro ecosystems that are around us. We have to stop putting plastic into the oceans, these obvious things that we're doing. The problems are so obvious, which is good because we need to change them quickly. We can have the solutions at hand as soon as we put ingenuity towards them. We have to stop with the patchwork, Band-Aid approach to human health, ecology, energy, you name the sector, Band-Aids, Band-Aids, Band-Aids. It's time for us as humans to say we want to stay and play together.
So you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk, because my understanding is that you're leading an effort to combat big pharma, the farming community, the pharmaceutical companies, as I said.
If you're part of the current paradigm, I'm probably against you. So if you're making a lot of money right now, I've probably got an idea how to disrupt your cash flow. because everything we're doing, and those are the three sectors that I think we can boil everything down to: energy, ecology, human health. Those are inseparable. If we don't start thinking about our energy policy as human health, we will continue to screw up the planet and the survivability of our species. So those three, I think, if we start to intellectually approach each other as humans and say, how can we disrupt these current paradigms? How can we completely do this? And I think we're seeing this, the emergence of just outside the box brilliance. Elon Musk, for example, who thought we could land rockets backwards and in a day decrease the cost of space travel by 90%? That's what my son wants to do. He wants to go work for SpaceX. He's a materials engineer. And so, it's an extraordinary moment where we have so much technology at hand. One of my companies that I run is a software company, and this is, again, kind of ties back into microbiome. I'm so convinced by what's happening under the microscopes in my labs that communication is everything. And so what we found in 2012 was a communication network between the bacteria and fungi. When you put communication into a complex ecosystem, the whole thing corrects itself in seconds. We can see cancerous cells go to non-cancerous cells. We can see protein synthesis that hasn't existed in decades suddenly go back to normal. We can see all of this happen just because communication comes in. So we immediately extrapolated that to the bigger world. It was like, well, of course, if that works for the microbiome, wouldn't it work as humans? What if we stop having politicians as our interface to the Russians? What if we stop having, our big energy companies as our interface to China? What if, as humans, we had a platform to start interacting on a social, political, health level? And so my software platform is a huge interactive system that says, let's just cooperate, because I know the solutions are at hand to win this thing, to play, to stay, not die as a human species.
So are you getting this information out to other people that are not like-minded?
I don't know. I feel like I have a tiny impact ultimately, right? Because my voice gets bigger every day just because our social media following and all of our YouTube junk and everything else. But we have 7 billion souls on the planet right now. I'm not talking to many of those, no matter how big my Facebook following happens. But 7 billion is a bigger number than anybody's got.
It's more viewers than we have.
On one level, yeah, right, yeah. You guys are rocking, A4M is smoking it, but not 7 billion. And so when you really look at the pool of humanity on the planet, I think none of us are really affecting it at a large amount. The cool story, though, is that it doesn't take touching very many to make the big change, right? And so I think that 100th monkey phenomenon is real. And so I think if we can reach, 500 million people and get them communicating on the level of professional development of intellectual ideas and create that space, we'll see magic happen.
So talk to me about your involvement with the M Clinic and what you're doing there.
The M Clinic's my longtime passion. It used to be Revolution Health Center, and then got rebranded to M Clinic. This is my preventive health clinic, and this is where we teach all our nutrition protocols and all of the cool integrative medicine that we do now. And it's basically my funnest workshop, right? Because there's nothing like a patient interaction, a patient relationship to teach you real truth. Because I can see things happen under the microscope all day long, and it can lead me down pathways, but I don't know it's true until I see it happen in a patient. And I gotta say, my patient population out there at the M Clinic, get through this without crying, but talk about my best mentors, teachers, advocates, patient people who are working so hard to find health in their own life, or so often mothers trying to find health for their autistic children and everything else and pushing so hard. Those people are the heroes on the planet right now. Those mothers who are out there advocating every second for their family's nutrition, trying to get organic food where it's so hard to find organic food, trying to do something right by their children who are getting toxins every time they go to a birthday party or school or whatever it is. These mothers are the heroes. And so that's actually why we rebranded Revolution Health Center. We realized the solution is already had. We don't need a revolution. We just need to honor the balancing point of humanity. And the M happens to be the center point of most of the written languages on the planet. And so it's the center point, but it's also this interesting letter that represents both the masculine and the feminine. And so the M Clinic's really about, if we can find that balance of this creative, nurturing, feminine archetype that we all have within us, we can ignite healing on levels that have really never been witnessed before, and we better, because we're going to die without it.
So let's rewind the tape a little bit. So you had these 3 board certifications at that point that you left to go do hospice and palliative care. And then prior to that, your discovery of what vitamin A did for the body. At what point did you transition entirely into integrative functional medicine?
Oh, it's such a slippery slope, right? I don't think it happens overnight. It's like you start to make one chink, but the initial chink happened with the vitamin A compounds for sure, and realizing that nutrition was important. I hadn't been taught any nutrition in my allopathic training, 17 years, board certs, whatever.
Did you live a healthy life yourself at that time?
No, not at all. Mostly because I wasn't sleeping, right? Like, for a decade, I didn't sleep. I was just in the hospitals, 24-hour, 36-hour shifts, horrible situation, eating hospital food, some of the most toxic things on the planet. Yeah, and so no, I was horribly healthy, majorly depressed by the end of that course at University of Virginia because, my body was toxic, but more than anything else, I was like, I cannot shove more stuff into my brain, and yet I'm not finding any answers. And so I was just at a intellectual, academic collapse as well as a physiologic, collapse happening at that time. And so I really think I was the first patient healed through the M clinic. Is like, I've been on this personal journey, and that's what I tell all my patients whenever they come in and what state of recovery or demise they might feel they are in. I'm like 1 or 2 steps ahead of you. I'm going to just teach you what I learned today. And my patients love it because they'll come back 3 months later. They've been seeing me for 9 years, and they're going to hear something new because I never sit still. I'm going to keep pushing and finding something to work better for me, which will work better for them, and that. So I think to say that I'm a finished integrative medicine doctor is, I hope I'm nowhere near starting the journey.
Talk to us about the therapeutic applications of shockwave therapy and how you got into that.
Yeah. So, I talk about biology and cell biology all the time and have all this excitement around genomics and proteomics and how the human body builds itself. It's an extraordinary story. But then if you stop for a second and look at the atomic structure, it gets even just as ridiculous as the microbiome story just was. At the atomic level, we are 0.001% solid. 0.0001% solid. 99.99% vacuum space. So human physiology, Earth physiology, solid stuff in the entire universe is, 0.9999% of reality. The rest of it is vacuum space, and sitting in that vacuum space is the electromagnetic field. And so ultimately, we are not biologic, we are physics beasts. And so my favorite therapies that we're coming out with in clinic are revolving around this space of the body, not the cells themselves. What is the space between? And that's where sound wave therapy, ultrasound techniques, laser techniques, all of these things start to come into play. And of course, they're all reinventions of ancient technologies. Acupuncture is my favorite therapy in the world. Like, it's so profound and cool as how it changes genomics and inflammatory cascades and all this stuff. And you're not doing anything directly to the cell. You're really trying to work within this invisible space of the meridians and the electrical flow through the body and this beautiful invisibility of the body. And so, anything from that to prayer, meditation. If you want the most powerful tool on the planet, it's meditation, period. No, I've never seen anything more powerful. We've got all these tech companies out there finding out how to make telomeres longer, turn on telomerase, get your telomeres longer. So you do the most powerful telomerase: prayer, meditation, spiritual song. Those 3 will make your telomeres longer than any technology discovered to date. And so, it's about that stillness within. I do this 8-week intensive program now online with patients all over the world, and we always start with this silence at the beginning together. It's so powerful to be silent. It's surprising because I talk so much.
Okay, so talk to me also about your 4-minute workout and how nitric oxide plays into all that.
Yeah, so you spent 3 subspecialties, $200,000, all this cell biology, and that's been my 4-minute workout that goes viral. It was free. It was like something you didn't, but at any rate, it probably is the most important public health impact in some ways. But the 4-minute workout was devised from some basic science that was being done around a molecule called nitric oxide. And the nitric oxide ends up being the only redox molecule that's made by the human cells. The vast majority of, the nitric oxide-like molecules, these redox molecules throughout our body, again, are made by the microbiome, bacteria, fungi, and the mitochondria, non-human. And so, but nitric oxide must be important because we make it. And it's released by all of our blood vessels when we exercise. And when the moment that it gets released is when we start to run out of oxygen at a big muscle group. And so the reason I developed the 4-minute workout is because we started to realize that the amount of reservoir of nitric oxide that we have in any given muscle group is tiny. We released it in 90 seconds. And so we got this thought in our thing, I should go to the gym. So 3, maybe 5 days a week, you get to the gym, you work out for an hour, and it was only in the first 90 seconds that you got nitric oxide. And so 3 or 5 times a week, Americans are out there releasing nitric oxide from 1 or 2 muscle groups, right? Because you go and do your arm day, or you do your leg day, or whatever it is. You're picking a small group of muscles and moving it 3 times a week, 5 times a week. We get almost no nitric oxide mechanism going. Nitric oxide is, Nobel Prize winner shows the most powerful way to reverse cardiovascular disease, not prevent, completely reverse existing cardiovascular disease, reverse dementias and neurodegenerative process, reverse, the aging process of fibroblasts in the skin and everything else. And so what's my best anti-aging tool? 4-minute workout, again and again. Nitric oxide is a powerful inducer of vitality and youth. And so I developed this 4-minute workout which moves 16 of the largest muscle groups in your body for 1.5 minutes, and you cycle it through. So if you Google 4-minute workout Zach Bush, it'll pop up on YouTube. You can watch it for free. But it's so ridiculous. Like we've got a great corporation that just picked this up. The CEO his wife, of course, is always the women that perpetrate the good information, but his wife came home and said, I just saw this 4-minute workout, tried it today. He was like, it sounds interesting, I'll try it. Did it for a week, couldn't believe the impact it had on his mental clarity, physiologic function, everything else. 1,600 employees, went back the next week and mandated that all of his employees do it 3 times a day. They have their intercom system goes off, everybody stops and does. He's written these testimonials about the 4-minute workout. The production of the entire company's improved, health has improved, healthcare costs have dropped, 4-minute workout. And so, if I could do one thing, and I almost think Trump is wild enough to maybe do this. I think I could probably talk him into making the whole U.S., and he could tweet us all at 3 times a day and say 4-minute workout, right? And we could all do it.
I don't think anybody
CNN
can talk him into doing anything.
No, we have to convince him it's his idea.
There you go. On that note. Okay. So I noticed that you are described as an architect for a healthy future. So is this pretty much a metaphor of everything that you are doing to affect change, both on a global level as well as for your own patients? Tell me how you came up with that.
Yeah, so it definitely plugs into one really cool realization that I had a number of years ago, and it wasn't because I was smart, just it was obvious, the patterns were obvious. But once you find a truth, like communication between bacteria, once employed, within months, improves the communication of that woman to her spouse. And so watching the macro changes to a microscopic communication network started to teach us very quickly that, whoa, if you find truth, it's fractal. And that's, of course, how nature works in fractals. Fractals are these patterns that happen down ultimately in the vacuum space, then the electromagnetic field, then in the atomic structure, then in the molecular structure, then in protein structure, and it keeps building out to the planet and the electromagnetic field our planet gives off, and the solar system. And
you can take a breath.
You can see this thing going on and on. It's all fractal. It's the same mass, same patterns, and everything else. And so that was the excitement of, if we find health under a microscope, we can now go apply that to our social systems, our political systems, and everything else. And so I ended up starting a company called Seraphic Group. You maybe have heard of the seraphim, which are these 4 giant angels that carry out the will of God. And seraphic means befitting of the seraphim. So everybody who joins is really supposed to be really thinking of their highest purpose and how we are supposed to. It's clear in the math of humanity. We are really the epicenter of the physical world. If you look at the mathematical center point between the entire universe and Planck's constant, which is the tiniest thing we can measure, biggest thing we can measure, tiniest thing measure, mathematical dead center point is human. It's totally bizarre. We look to be somehow in this purpose strain of the entire physical universe, and we're in the middle of that. And so I think we're supposed to be there. So Seraphic Group has a mission statement that we are there to create disruptive technologies for sustainable solutions in energy, ecology, and health. And those 3, because they are inseparable. I was working so hard to make my patients healthy with all this food, nutrition, only to find out that the chemical in there, which is Roundup, glyphosate, is inseparable from the food. It's in the water structure of the food. It's in our water that we drink. It's actually in 75% of our rainfall now. It's in 75% of the air we breathe. We are steeped in a chemical that came to us through the ecological management of our farming industry. Sudden realization as a doctor of like, I'm useless. As a doctor, I might as well retire now. I will never induce a public health event if I am in this strain of medical health. Can't be done. So I realized if I was going to have any impact, pass anything off to my children and grandchildren, it was going to be through affecting the ecology. Soon as we got into ecology, it's run by the chemical industries, which are just offshoots of the petroleum industry. So you suddenly realize that energy, ecology, health, they're run by the same companies. Bayer just bought Monsanto. It was owned by our U.S. pharmaceutical companies before that. So our pharmaceutical companies are owning our chemical companies that are growing our food, that are derived from our energy. And you start to see that, wow, we've got 6 companies that run the world. And so all we have to do is take down those 6 companies through disruptive technologies that rebuild that architecture of the future, and then we'll have a different life.
You talk about the concept of pharmaceutical deficiency.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my more humbling moments. You know, you go through life and you just think you're trucking along the line and you think you're doing something good for the world, and I certainly intended to with chemotherapy development. I thought I was really being part of the fight on cancer and all this stuff. But it may be because I was depressed at the time, I was able to ask some tough questions about what was going on, and it was a dismal day when I finally asked that question of like, what cancer stems from a pharmaceutical deficiency? And the answer, of course, is so obvious. There's zero. There's no disease that stems from a pharmaceutical deficiency. And so when you start to go down that avenue, you have 2 options. You can slide into denial right away and pretend you never had that thought and continue to practice a pharmaceutical model, or you have to retire. And so I had to do that pretty quickly. Over the course of a few months, I went from full-on allopathic researcher, medical educator, clinical instructor at the university level to a little plumbing building. I cashed in my 401k, started my little clinic in rural Virginia, poorest county in Virginia. I figured if I couldn't figure out how to bring health to the core of America, nothing was going to help public health. Going to make Santa Barbara a little healthier wasn't going to, move the radar. And so that was a difficult decision, but it was the right one in the end. And it, I don't recommend it to anybody because I don't want you to blame me for 5 years of misery and tough times, because it will be tough and it will be miserable on levels, because you have to break up everything. If you're going to deconstruct a major paradigm in your life, it's going to be fractal too, and you're starting to disrupt everything. And it's going to tear you down to the freaking foundation of your life, which is not an easy journey, but it's so freaking worthwhile. And so you're all doing this right now. And all of you are questioning life around you every second. And you have different defense mechanisms that you've set up to help protect you from those things. And all of you are on a journey towards more and more enlightenment. And I feel I'm just, starting that journey. And there's a real sense that we're supposed to be here, a real sense that there is some huge purpose welling up within humanity itself right now. And we shouldn't be dismayed at all by our politicians. They are just like acute inflammation or these signs of inflammation in a medical situation. You can even see it in a single presidential race. If you look at Donald Trump's pictures at the beginning and then Hillary Clinton, as they marched towards those last couple debates, Hillary collapsed from pneumonia. You swore Donald was going to have a heart attack on stage. You could see how inflamed his face was and red and engorged, and all the blood vessels dilated, rosacea, his small intestines were a disaster. I mean, you could tell physiologic was literally collapsing in these 2 individuals. And the macro fractal of that was the inflammatory rhetoric. And so their rhetoric, started pretty congenial. You remember Hillary spent most of her time kind of teasing Donald Trump at the beginning. And I just assumed he was going to self-destruct. And so she was flippant and kind of tease him. At the end, she's like spitting pissed, so angry, and he was angry the whole time, I think. But you can see that physiologic effect. That's good. That's an immune response. right? Inflammation is ultimately good. It's about the healing process. And so we should not look around at the evening news and be completely dismayed. We should look at it and say, there's a massive immune reaction happening in humanity, and it can lead us to the path of solution on the other side of that, and we can become the anti-inflammatory agents within our social and political structures. And so that's the great joy that I feel welling up in humanity. And I can see it just like every community I'm in. I have the pleasure of lecturing all over the country, and day to day, week to week in different locations, you see this sense of purpose and intention welling up that didn't exist just 2 years ago. The inflammatory nature woke us up and said, if we're going to stay, we're going to have to work together. Politicians aren't going to do it. We as consumers are going to have to make that change.
So I typically ask, what do you hope to see the next 5 years? I mean, I know what you hope to see in the next 5 years in regard to our health and our world and humanity and longevity and creating, a healthier environment and reducing the toxins and whatnot that's in our environment today. I know you're driven by the concept of your children and grandchildren living exponentially, to 150 or what have you, healthy lives in a healthy world. What are you going to do? Like, what's next for you? You've got your hand in so many different things.
I think I can boil down all my projects, all the companies, everything else down to one thing, which is listening. I just hope that in 5 years, I'm a way better listener than I am today. And I hope that humanity is starting to hear each other. I hope we all can take a breath long enough to listen for a moment. We're freaking amazing. We're amazing beings. We are full of so much wisdom. We are full of so much passion and purpose. And I hope that I'm hearing myself better at that point and hearing how all those things will ring truer in my own life. And that will be fractal. And if each of you begin to hear yourself better, you'll know your purpose clearer. There is no redundancy in 7 billion souls. We all showed up on purpose. And none of those purposes cancel out or make redundant or unnecessary any of the other souls. 7 billion people on purpose. By 2050, 9 billion people on purpose. I can't wait.
If you weren't a physician, what do you think you'd be doing?
Well, I would love to say that I would be a full-time musician because I love music, but the reality is I'm probably not a good enough musician to do that full-time ever, no matter how little physicianing I do. So I build all the time. So I love building. I built my own house with my son over the last 10 years, and we have a log home in rural Virginia, and I love building stuff. I would take down dead trees and mill them into wood and build beds and furniture, and that just gives me great pleasure. It just reminds me of how connected we are to nature and how ingenuity and creativity has always been connected to nature since the beginning of human times, and it's only in these last few years where technology has started to separate us from nature itself. And that's a big caution to us. We should really pay attention to that, I think, is if you aren't having your hands in the dirt somewhere in your life, then you're missing an opportunity there, and you're probably missing health for that reason. So dive in, get it.
How would your sons describe you?
Son and a daughter, totally different personalities. Oh my gosh, I don't even think I want to know that one. My son is increasingly tolerant of the speed I travel. He is contemplative genius. He's very, very smart engineer, very, very smart physicist mind, and the best listener I know. And I've learned a ton being his dad. Cool thing. And my daughter, we're pretty much soulmates. Like, we just laugh so much together. But I think she'd tell you that I'm way funnier than you think I am, and that I've got a sense of humor that makes the rest of me tolerable. And
they've got to be pretty proud of you.
No, they're 18 and 20. I couldn't care less about that right now. Maybe they're proud of me on some level, but most of all, the whole thing about parenting well is just get the hell out of the way, right? Like just stay out of the way. Don't program them with anything you believe because it's wrong. And so I don't know that they're proud of me yet. Maybe they will be someday. But I think that most of all, they found their passions so early, which I think was a symptom of it. And so they're so wrapped up in their passions. My son, engineering, wants to go to Mars, and that's his solution. And it makes me a little sad to talk to him because he says, Dad, so the only solution I can think of for humanity is to go to another freaking planet and start over again. That's a pretty grim reality from a really smart 20-year-old kid.
Go to Mars and the M Clinic will take on a whole new meaning.
Yeah, there. Right. And so my daughter, on the other hand, is a performer and an entertainer. She is a dancer and artist and just got accepted to Broadway. So she's going to be on Broadway for a couple of years with the American Music and Dance Academy there. And so great kids, great passions, and I just can't wait to see where their passions go. But the fact that my daughter showed up on this planet and her purpose is to make people laugh and be entertained, it's really freaking hopeful to me, because if that's true, then we're going to survive. We must still be alive and laughing in 20 years.
What do you hope your legacy will be?
I don't know. I think the belief that there would be a legacy after anything I do is far-fetched. The universe is continuous energy. What you see me sitting here is a ditzel of my reality. I think I'm bigger than you and I can imagine. You're bigger than I can imagine. To say that you have a legacy in that physical body, you have a legacy that's probably billions of years old, that's just beautiful. You're a soul that resonates through, and that's what lights you up and makes you interesting to talk to. And that's the legacy. It's not in the physical body. It's not some science or paper or book. I love people. Love will be my legacy, maybe.
You're quite an inspiration, Dr. Bush. Thank you so much for your time. Best of luck with everything you're doing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
I'm a groupie. I'm officially a groupie.